Yo, what's up guys? It's Turn here and today we are back with a brand new video. So as most of you guys have probably seen, I posted on my Instagram, the Florida Mutineers have announced their roster for the 2023 season. So we're just gonna touch on what we think of the roster. But before we get into it, um, we're gonna go through what their Vanguard year kind of looked like. So starting with the major events, I'm not going to count the Kickoff Classic because that's just kind of, you know, that's kind of whatever. They didn't really matter. But yeah, so if you look at Major 1, for Major 1, they placed 9th through 12th. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, they had Skies Awakening, Dave, and Vivid. Then we go on to Major 2. They placed 4th. I was at that event actually. I thought they played pretty well. I thought it was kind of an overperformance, though, to be honest. Um, but going to the Pro Am Classic, they get 5th through 8th. Uh, that is good considering the fact that there was 12 pro teams there, and there was also amateur teams. Obviously, none of the amateur teams made that bracket, but some of those amateur teams were really good. So I think that kind of, like they weren't looking horrible at that point. And then they go into the major three. They place 5th through 6th, and that's it's not good. But that was also the last time the roster of Skies Awakening, Dave Patty, and Vivid played together. Obviously, after that, you saw Dave Patty's benched, and Vivid gets sold or traded to Boston, whatever. So, they bring in Major Maniac and Two Real. Obviously, I think Major Maniac was a good pickup for them. Um, I think Two Real kind of had an unfortunate circumstance. I think Florida was really bad about like having their subs. Um, I think they could have had used their sub player, which was Yeez, instead of dropping Dave Patty, who was an AR, for another AR, and then also having Skies and Awakening on the roster. I think a lot of people are kind of saying they should make a change for another sub. So I think you got rid of your best sub, replaced him with a challenger player, and then brought in another AR to replace your main AR that you didn't really need in the first place because you already had Skies and Awakening who could have ran main AR and flex. Um, so I think that roster kind of took a step backwards, but they did end up placing 5th through 6th in Major 4. Um, obviously they didn't make champs, so where does that roster kind of go from there in the offseason? They lose two of their biggest free agents, which is Skies and Awakening. Um, Yeez also, who was their sub, but I don't really think he was a very big loss for them because they obviously didn't have the confidence to put him in when they were making roster changes in the first place. They went with Two Real, who was from Challengers, even though Yeez has been sitting on their bench since Cold War. So you bring in Two Real, Major Maniac. Um, I thought you'd probably keep Major. I like Major. I think he's good at S&D, very good at S&D. I think he's also a good leader. I think he brings a lot of value to that team. Um, I honestly didn't really think Minnesota should have dropped him last year. I think that kind of hurt them. Like maybe Priesta should have been the one, or Standy. Just judging off performance. Like Major Maniac's always going to be solid, and he's going to pull through in S&D. But yeah. So you keep Major Maniac, Skies and Awakening leave. You release Two Real. Yeez is gone as well. So where do you go from there? I think the first thing that they did was probably look at subs. Most of the other teams got all the good sub players. Obviously, Boston locked up Near and Vivid. I don't think Vivid would have came back there anyway. I think the only other person you probably could have got was maybe Asim off LAG. And even then, there was a brief stint last year where Asim could have went to Florida when the Gorillas got Neptune, and he decided not to do that. He wanted to stay on LAG. So I think for them, I think you had to take a gamble on some challenger talent. So the roster that they formed was Havoc, Vickle, Brack, and Major Maniac. Um, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the sub players. I think for the situation that they had, I think they got decent or like good sub players. I think that Havoc had a phenomenal year last year, obviously, in Challengers, came in the Pro League. Wasn't as successful, but I still think that it was, like, it wasn't bad. And it was definitely, he was a little more consistent than he had been in the past. So I think that was kind of an issue for them when they had Havoc before. So I think bringing him in was a good thing. Um, I also think Bickle, in terms of SNG talent and challengers, I think what's not already locked up, like even if you start looking at some EU players, I think you have Real that's on Rocker Academy. I think you had Hixie who's on Toronto Academy. Vickle, I don't think he was signed. I think he was playing under them, but I don't think he was actually signed. Um, so I think that was the best player you probably could have got from challengers. And then obviously, if you move into kind of the flex player, I think Brack is a solid pickup for a flex player. Um, so the last time we kind of saw him was in BO4. I think he played well. Obviously, we also did see him in, I want to say it was MW, but he didn't really play. Uh, so if you guys don't know, Brack was on Toronto's bench for a long time. Um, and just never really got it. Like, never really, I wouldn't say didn't get his chance, but like, I think he got on it. I think he showed out, and he just kind of got shafted a bit. Um, just sitting on the bench and stuff like that. Obviously, if you guys remember the Toronto team, uh, it was like the 10-man roster, and a lot of them were like EU players. So you had like Metals, Lucky, Kleenex, Cammy, Bance. Um, those are just a few of the names. You also had Marky B as a coach, and I think they were already kind of veering towards that full European lineup. And then I think the only one that kept going into Cold War was Methods. So I think it's unfortunate for them. Um, I think he he was very good in BO4. I think after the MW thing, it was kind of just like how do you know, like you pretty much have to start in challengers, which I mean sucks for him because in BO4 he really was really good. Um, so then if you look at the end of his BO4 season, he ended up getting through 7th through 8th at the World Championship in 2019 with Slack, John, Formal, and Skies. Ricky is the coach. So I think for him, like this is more about just solidifying himself back in the league, which is something that I feel like he probably should have had an opportunity to do sooner. Like they were really good, that team in specific, and also just him. Obviously, him and Skies kind of came up together. Skies was off the UAU team, and Brack was part of that midnight roster with Envoy, Jet Li, Parzelian, and Lamagod. So I think his rookie year, he played pretty well. Um, and then MW, he just sits the bench. Cold War, I mean, he plays, but he doesn't really do anything. In Vanguard, we see him back in the league. So, like for him, it's just about trying to secure his spot in the league, but also, um, I think he needs to show out a little bit, just because Florida is one of those orgs that kind of, I wouldn't say like stat patterns, but if your stats look good, they're gonna keep you, and they're not really gonna care from what it seems like about how the actual team is playing. Obviously last year, you would think that if they did, they probably would have, you know, got another sub player instead of the AR thing I brought up earlier. But yeah, so those are the three new players on the roster, and then obviously you bring Major Maniac back. If I had to rank this roster, out of all the rosters we've seen, I think it's solid. I think it's also like a sleeper roster, which is kind of what I've always figured Florida to be. I didn't think they were going to be kind of one of those main teams that are super consistent. I thought it would just be more like, they have an opportunity to win. Um, and obviously, like, there's a year where in Modern Warfare 2019, um, Florida was really good, and they ended up winning a couple of events. But that was also when you had Pharaoh and Frosty and people like that. And a lot of people thought maybe you should have kept Frosty on the roster. I definitely thought that. Um, so I think for this roster, I think you're making moves into the right direction. I think you just kind of need to make sure that if a change needs to be made earlier in the season, especially with roles, um, I think that you need to make sure you're fast on that. Also, I think it would be a good idea for this team to sign a good sub that they're actually going to use instead of last year just having to use on the bench and not using him. I think that hurt them a lot. Um, and also, I think their coaching staff, obviously Willett's on there right now. A lot of you guys probably don't know him because I don't think he's really talked about much, but I think it's okay to keep Willett. I don't know if I'd have him as head coach though. I might bring in like some more veteran experience, like maybe a Haggy. You might be able to see just one of those type of players. Maybe you try to get like Looney off Minnesota, something like that. But yeah. So I think overall for this roster, I'd probably still put it 8 through 12. With the potential to, go up that ranks if some other team that we thought was going to be really strong just doesn't really adapt well to how the game is played. Obviously, we've kind of been seeing the beta gameplay. Maybe this team will be better with the ARs that you have. You have Major Maniac, who's pretty much good at almost every COD. You also have Brack, who tends to be a slower AR, which I think will really help them. Obviously, Vickle we haven't seen too much of, but I think that he is going to be the superstar for this team for sure. Him and Brack. And then Havoc, I think you just have a solid sub player. You know what he brings to the table. Good S&D. Same with Major Maniac. I think that team's S&D is very, very, very good. Um, so I think that's kind of where you'll see the most success from them. Not as much in the respawns, but yeah. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to comment down below what you guys would have done with the roster differently. Personally, I think it was very good for what they had left over. But yeah, so make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.